Hi friends, welcome back to my channel Testing Mini Bytes. I am your friend Amudan Shaktivel, and in this video we're gonna see another interesting topic about optional in Java. Again guys, using optional is not optional anymore. The current latest version of Java is Java 17 and optional is a functionality that came in Java 8. And most importantly, a lot of Java developers haven't started using this amazing functionality that is given in Java 8. And as a test automation engineer, we often fail to use all these functional programming or the Java 8 other features that came, right? So we haven't used them really well. So in this video we're going to see how we can use this optional into test automation space, and most importantly we'll understand what is optional and whether it is really solving the problem of null pointer exception, right? So without wasting much time, let's say this particular video we're going to see what is optional, and we're going to understand it with very simple examples, and then we're going to see people normally use optional, or here optional will solve null pointer exception. We will gonna understand it in detail how we're gonna do that, and we'll also see how different use cases. I have 4 of them, how we can use optional into test automation space, but it goes beyond that as well. And we'll also see why always using optional as a method return type is makes more sense instead of using it as a method arguments or constructor arguments or a field variable in a POJO, right? Without wasting much time, let's get into the IntelliJ, right? So normally, let's say I have string name equal to, let's say, Mudan, and yeah, and this is a very simple string, and let's me try to do some comparison that name dot equals ignore case, and or I'm just trying to check whether this is starting with am, whatever, right? And if I try to run it, it will work absolutely fine. It will print true. But let's say whatsoever reason this value is coming from some databases, or we are reading it from API or doing something like that, and it is somewhere somewhat it's assigned as a null value, right? So let's try to run it and see what's happening, right? And this is when the null pointer exception happens. When you try to operate on a null, you get this null pointer exception, and this optional is going to provide a way how we can escape from this null pointer exception, right? Good. So instead of just saying as name string of name, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have optional class, right? So this is optional. This optional is coming from java.util, and this is, let's say I'm going to store a string value into it. So the generic is string here, and let's name it as name1 and equal to, again I cannot use new optional because they don't have exposed their constructor. So the only way I could create an instance for this optional is using a static method that is off, and then off nullable, and then empty. So they have three static methods that gonna help us to create optional instance. Again guys, if you haven't watched my videos completely, please do watch them, because I have covered why people are using static methods instead of constructors to create objects, right? Please check out my code refactoring playlist if you haven't done that yet. Now basically, there are three methods here, and let's say I want to use of nullable, and I will say Amudan here, right? And if I want to fetch the value out of it, I have to say name1 dot get, right? And if there is a value, it'll get that value. If it is null, let's see what it prints, right? So first let's comment it out and let's see what it happens, right? So let's try to run it. So there is a value. Now we are trying to get the value out of it, so we are calling the get method and we are getting the value. Let's say this is null. Let's say this is null, and let's see what happens. So this time, see, there is no such element exception, right? It hasn't printed the null pointer now. It is telling no such element. So what is this optional, guys? What is this optional? We're not sure what is this optional. So imagine you have something like a container. Okay, optional is basically a container which can hold anything. Okay, let's say this is an optional, simple optional that holds a string, right? Your optional can also hold an employee. An optional can hold an int. Imagine it's like your container. It's like a lunchbox, right? You can in a lunchbox you can keep different lunches, right? You can keep sandwiches there. You can keep some salads out there, right? You can keep anything out there. And sometimes this container can also be empty. Okay, it will not be anything. Okay, this container can also be empty like this. Okay, this is an optional. Okay, this is an optional. Okay, let's say this is an optional basically, but this is an empty optional. Okay, this is empty. This doesn't have anything. Okay, this container is empty. Okay, so sometimes if it is not having anything, it will be empty. Okay, so that's what happens here. So we are trying to assign some null which is not actually good. Okay, but we are trying to get it, there is no value. So it basically it printed no such element. It is not there. How can I avoid this? First, instead of directly getting the value, what I can do is I can check if name one, okay, dot is present. Okay, if it is present, I want to print the name. Okay, name one dot get, right? If it is not there, you ignore it, right? So let's try to run it now. So now this is not even printed, and if there is some value here, it will be printed. So if there is a value, it will print it. If there is no value, it won't print it. Instead, if we go inside this particular method, and if we you know increase the size, it is first checking whether it is null. If it is null, then it will return optional dot empty. Otherwise, it will call the off method, right, and then pass the value. So yeah, so you can basically use these things to hold a value. So optional are basically a container to hold a value. Sometimes if you don't want to store anything for now, let's say this is a string type, and let's say name, you don't want to store anything, you can basically say optional dot empty. Okay, instead of you assigning a value as null or something like that, you can keep it as an empty, right? If it is empty, you can change it later at point of time, so it won't throw you null pointer exception, right? So that's the pretty much advantage of using optional, right? And what is off method? So we have covered empty, which means that it will create a container, and the container will not have anything. Okay, if there is something called as off, this off method also accepts some values. You can pass more than now, because I am telling it's a string type. So this method is very simple method. It just takes the value, and it will try to create a new optional of value. So if you are passing null to it, okay, it will still throw the null pointer exception. But the off nullable method will not throw the null pointer exception. If the value that you passed is null, it will do the check, and if it is null, it will return an optional dot empty as a return type. Okay, if it is not null, it will try to call the off method internally. Okay, so whenever you are trying to try to use nullable of nullable, because it internally handles and creates an optional empty for you instead of throwing the exception. Okay, Amudan, this is fine, but I could not relate this with the real time. Where can I use this? That's when I have 4 use cases. Okay, so the first use case is, let's say, in most of the time we pass the browser values in our test automation, or we pass some other values. Let's say you want to run it in some browsers, or you want to pass in the run mode, or you want to pass in your password, or something like that. You want to pass it via environment variables, or let's say system properties. Okay, so here I'm using environment variables to pass this browser. If I try to run this now, normally we code like this. Okay, I'm trying to get the browser. If the browser is null, by default I want to assign Chrome value, and then I want to run my test in Chrome. This is the default code how I write, right? Let's try to run it and see what's happening. So nothing happens, because even though this is null, this is an if condition, and then it's not doing anything. So this if condition will not be satisfied, so it will be skipped. Okay, but the same line of code, what I can do, I can write it in a different way, right? So what I can do is system dot get environment, and I'm trying to fetch the browser value. Okay, and I want to wrap it this with optional dot of nullable, right? Right. Optional dot of nullable. Okay, and I'm trying to get this value, right? If it is there, dot. If it is present, okay, I want to do something. Okay, or else I want to do something else, right? So let's say, or else I want to basically return Chrome as the default one. Okay, okay, something like this. Okay, so you can basically do all these things. Okay, So string of browser, let's say browser one. Okay, so the same thing we are writing it here, but we also have or else, where if it is not equal to null, let's say you are doing else, you do some operations here, the same thing you can do it here. So try to get the user input for the browser. If it is not present, okay, you return by default Chrome. So if I try to print out, so v now, it basically prints Chrome because this is null, right? So this value is printing us null, sorry, Chrome. So let's say I pass a browser value from the uh, let's say environment variables. Let's go here and create one. Let's create one, let's say it's browser, and the value is going to be Firefox. Okay, and let's click on OK, and let's try to run it. So now I have passed the value from the user input, the environment variable. So the value is Firefox. So the it will check whether if it is null by itself. Okay, if it is null, then it will use this. If it is not null, it will use the I'll use whatever the user passed. So this is pretty cool, right? Instead of you writing if conditions and moving around and scratching your head, the optional will take care of doing all that thing, right? Again, it's not only a way, we have to use or else, we can also use something else, right? So let's say of optional dot of nullable, and then I use the same thing here, system dot get environment. I'm trying to get browser, okay, and instead of or else, I can also use or else get. Okay, what is the difference between or else and or else get is or else get uses a supplier implementation, which means this will be lazily evaluated. Okay, in the previous case, or else, even though this is a passing or failing, it doesn't matter. It will do the efforts to construct the string. Java will do it, but in this case, it will only call this thing if it is failing. Okay, if this condition is failing, then only it will call. Let's assume this is a method. Okay, let's say there is a method that returns public string type and get default browser. Okay, let's say you have a method like this and it returning you Chrome. Okay, instead you want to, instead of this, you want to make a call to the method, right? Previously you could have do like this, or else this get default browser. Okay, now this or else get what to do. Let's assume you are doing a lot of DB calls, API calls, or all that. Okay, and it's a very expensive method. Okay, it does a lot of operation. Okay, so you don't want to call this and then waste your time if this is going to pass, because if this is going to pass, you don't have to spend your efforts, or your Java doesn't have to spend efforts on doing this operations, right? So that's the reason why we use or else get. Or else get uses supplier implementation, which means this particular method will only be called if this is null. Otherwise, it won't be called. You save a lot of space and memory in executing these steps. Okay, good. And what else is there? Let's say I copy this, and I'll also have there is something called as if present or else, or if present. If you notice this if present, if only if it is present, I want to do something. Okay, so let's say I want to print out the browser value. Okay, if it is present, otherwise it will be simply ignored. Okay, it doesn't even care about it. And let's comment out all this code here, and let's try to see what's happening. So now the browser value will be there, so if it will be printed, right? So browser value is printed. But if it is not there, then it won't even do anything. It won't throw exception. It won't do anything. Okay, it just ignores it. Okay, you don't have to write the logic by yourself. It happens automatically, and this is more readable as well, right? Let's say if present you want to do something, if not you also want to do something else, and then you can also use if present or else. Okay, there is if present or else, where I want to, if it is present, I want to print it. If it is not present, it asks for a runnable implementation. Let's say I just want to say it is not present. Yes out, it is not present. Okay, something like this. So if the value is not present, it will basically print it is not present. Again, guys, this is a runnable implementation, and this is now same as the supplier implementation. If you haven't watched my Java 8 playlist, please do watch that so that you can understand what's happening. So this optional has a lot of inbuilt methods that you can leverage and use it based on your needs. And also on top of it, you can also use or else, or else suppose you want to say, let's say if this is not present, you want to throw some exception, so you can basically throw or else throw. So let's say I want to score illegal state exception or illegal access, whatever, illegal state exception, right? You can do that. So here you have to write if condition. If this is present, I want to do this, else throw new illegal argument exception. Instead, you can make it more readable like this, right? So this is a pretty good advantage of using the first test case is where you pass some system environment variables or system variables. If it is null, you want to handle it, then you can use optional dot of nullable, and then you can handle it. The second use case is pretty cool, which you might like. Let's say you are trying to launch a browser, and then sometimes there will be a JavaScript pop-up and sometimes there won't be JavaScript pop-up. In those cases, how will you handle it? This is a normal way how will you write the code, right? If the driver dot switch to alert dot accept, if it is present, it will switch to that and then it will click on it. If not, it will catch the exception and it will move and execute the next code. But this is little verbose and doesn't really shows our intention. Let's say how we can handle this with the help of optional. Okay, the same piece of code, instead of writing try catch blocks, what you can do, you can tell optional dot of nullable, right? And this optional dot nullable, I'm just telling expected conditions dot alert is present. Okay, if the alert is present, okay, that's fine. If present, if the alert is present, what I want to do, I want to click on the alert, or I want to basically accept the alert. If the alert is not there, I want to ignore it, right? So what is telling cannot be reference to a static context. Okay. Okay, I have done a mistake. So I need to tell apply. Okay, expected conditions dot apply whatever the driver variable. Okay, and if that is the case, I can just tell if present, I want to click on the alert, right? Just basically accept the alert. If not, I will simply ignore the alert. Yes, so I say alert is not present and ignored. Okay, like this. I am doing some mistake here. If you notice, this is fine. Okay, this is why throwing error present. Sorry, this is if present, right? So if present doesn't need this. Okay, if you use if present or else, then it will accept this. Okay, or else. Okay, then it is fine. If you want to only click on or else you don't want to do, then you can remove this, and then you can remove this as well, right? If present, it will accept it. If not, it will won't do anything. So instead of writing like this, you can basically save a lot of time and write like this, right? Let's try it out with the help of manually creating a pop-up. So now there is a pop-up that is present. So I'll remove this code and let's try to run it and see what's happening. This time the alert should be clicked. So I'm creating the pop-up myself. So pop-up is shown and then it is clicked. It's closed as well. Now let's also comment out this so that the pop-up won't be displayed. Now let's again try to run it. It should still pass because we are using of nullable, right? Good. Again, guys, you might know what is apply. Apply is, this basically accepts your function interface. So functional interface implementation. If you haven't watched my Java 8 playlist, please do watch that so that you can try to write more effective code like this. Okay, good. So now the test is also getting passed, but without any try catch blocks. Third use case. Let's assume I have a person Pojo like this, and this is a very simple Pojo. I'm using a builder pattern to construct values. You have all argument constructor and no argument constructor and all that. It's fine. And let's say instead of you creating it manually, let's assume this is some response from an API, and you are using response dot as and then you are mapping to person.class in rest assured. Okay, let's assume you are doing like this, but here I'm just using a builder pattern to build it. So now I haven't given any first name. Okay, so if I try to get some first name and I try to do some comparison, it will obviously throw me null pointer exception because there is no first name here, right? There is no first name here. How could you avoid this? The first way is optional dot of nullable. Okay, and then you can use person. Okay, colon get first name. You're trying to get the first name, and if it is there, you want to do something. If it is not there, you don't want to do that, right? So you can basically, or you can just say person dot get first name. If it is present, you want to do something. If not, you want to do something. So you can basically use optional dot of nullable, and then you can write your logic. Let's say you want to give some default values instead, then you can use if present or else, right? So you can also do or else get. By default, you want to get some values, you can also do that. Or basically you can directly customize the getter method there. Okay, let's go to that particular class and let's provide the implementation for this ourselves. Let's put control and I want a getter method for the first name, right? And instead of returning the string myself, I'm going to do optional of string. Okay, okay, and okay. So now I'm not directly returning the first name. I'm just checking whether this is optional dot of nullable. Okay, and then first name. If the first name is null, okay, it won't return that. Okay, it won't return the first name. Instead, it's going to return optional of empty. Okay, so yeah, so basically you can avoid all that. So if you want to access it, you just need to tell if present, and then you can access it. Okay, so yeah, this is how we can basically make a make a getter method to return optional. Okay, if you don't use this, you have to write the logic yourself. If first name, okay, first name, you have to write the logic yourself. If not equal to null, then return it. Otherwise you return some default value, right? You have to do all that, but now this is not required. It will automatically do that for you, right? Or by default you want to do some return values, right? So you can also add that here as well, right? So it is up to you on how you want to operate. Okay, maybe instead of changing the return type itself, you can also customize. Okay, let it be return the string, but this time you decide which one you want to return. Optional dot off, and then or else. If it is present, you return that. Or else by default return a string. Okay, or else return, let's say, default value of Amuda. Okay, so you can write conditions like this, and then you can basically work on them, right? It's up to you how you want to operate. But basic understanding is wherever you feel there is a null pointer exception, you want to get over it, try to use optional and then try to leverage these methods that they have created. Good. At the end, not, not the easy one. Let's say you have a list of web elements. Let's say uh, I'm opening the browser and then I have list of web elements. I want to click on a random element. Okay, I don't care what I'm clicking on it. Okay, I just want to click on it, that's it. In those cases, what we do write some logic, get random element, we pass the elements, and so that we know what is the size of the array. So let's say this list is having 1 to 10, okay, elements. So the size is 11 and the list is from 0 to 10. So you want to return some, write some logic to return a value that is between 0 to 10. So you are writing something, but here I have hard coded to 0. Okay, so you are writing some logic yourself on doing all that thing, and then you are trying to click on a random element, right? So let's try to click on a random element, but this will basically click on the 0th element, right? So let's say what it's clicking in the google.com, it should basically click on some first element that is matching some. Okay, it is basically clicking on the text box, right? Basically if you are using something else instead of q, it will click on that. So now instead of all the things, what I can basically do, instead of writing the logics and all that, I can simply do driver dot find elements and by dot name. I'm using the same locator so that we can see whether it is clicking on that. And then I'm just creating a stream out of it. And then I can tell find first. Find first means if there are 10 elements, it will find the first one. Okay. and this is basically returning you an optional. So if you notice, only in the optional we get if present or else throw, or if present or else, all these things we'll get only in the optional, right? So this basically the first find first will return you optional. Okay, or you can also use find any, which means if there are a lot of elements, it will by default pick something in random. Okay, let's say I use an XPath here, I use some XPath here, and I'm just trying to click on some random links. Okay, that is matching slash slash a. So it will try to find anything, and then at the end, what I want to do, I want to check if it is present, I want to click on it. Okay, web elements colon colon click. Okay, if it is not, I want to ignore, or else you can also use if present or else. Okay, what do you want to do, you can do that, but this time this is more readable and understandable. Instead of you spending your time on finding the random element, this find any and find first will do that for you, right? Let's try to run it and see what's happening. So it should click some first link in the some link. Okay, it's just finding any link in the web page and should click on it. So basically it moved to some page, right? So this basically clicked on some elements. So this is how you can use find any. Same way you can use find first as well. And not only that, you can basically leverage other methods. Let's say if something is not there, you want to throw some exception, you can also do throw or else throw, and then you can pass the supplier implementation. So you can also do some predicate operations if you want to do. Let's say I want to check whether the element, whatever the element that I pass, I want to get the text out of it, and if the text is matching something else, I want to click on it. So you can apply filter logic of on top of that find any. Okay, so you can basically leverage all this map filter, flat map, and all this operation on top of these optional. So I hope you all find it useful, and I hopefully believe that you all will start to use functional programming into your test automation space and Java 8 as well. Thank you all for listening to me. I will see you guys in another great video. Until then, tada, bye bye from Mohan. Bye.